Today's Take 5 with the Saints, March the 30th, is Innocent of Alaska. Innocent was the name given to John Veniaminov. I have to look down to make sure I get this right. A Russian Orthodox priest born in the Irkutsk province of Russia, which is in the middle of Siberia, just to the north of the modern-day border with Mongolia. And John Veniaminov, who became known as Innocent, was one charged to help bring the gospel to the native peoples of Alaska. But like many of the saints on our calendar who were charged with taking the gospel to faraway lands, is on this list not only because of his quote-unquote success in bringing many natives to the knowledge of the gospel, but also because of the graceful and loving way in which he respected the customs and cultures of the peoples, and yet, without reservation, offered them the life-giving message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today's reading that goes with his feast day comes out of Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 11. I thank my God every time I remember you, constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you, because of your sharing in the gospel from the first day until now. I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. It is right for me to think this way about all of you because you hold me in your heart, for all of you share in God's grace with me, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness how I long for all of you with the compassion of Christ Jesus. And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight, to help you to determine what is best, so that in the day of Christ you may be pure and blameless, having produced the harvest of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, for the glory and praise of God. A reading from Philippians is one that I always like to hear from Paul, because Father Ashton and I both here at St. Stephen's are big fans of Paul, recognizing that sometimes things that Paul say, there's some things that, yes, you can challenge and poke a little bit in our modern and contemporary understanding, but here is one of the many examples of why Paul is important, because as Paul was charged to bring the gospel to faraway lands, he did it with a clear enthusiasm and joy and zeal for the interests of the people to whom he brought this message. It was not just about convert or die, as often is thought of by imperialistic missionaries who came during conquering in conquistadors and during times in which European powers were more interested in exploiting rather than sharing the gospel. Paul reminds us, and is a good example for today's Saint Innocent, of those who truly care for the interests of the people to whom they come. John Veniaminov, that's the last time I'm going to say that, I'll refer to him as Innocent from now on, born in 1797, became a priest in the Russian Orthodox Church, and in 1823, the Bishop of Irkutsk, Michael, was instructed to send a priest to the island of Unalaska, which was in the Aleutians, the modern-day islands, of course, off of Alaska, that are numerous and which many natives who were there would often transport between by canoe. So after 2 years of service as a parish priest, just enough time to have, quote, a curacy as we would understand it today, Innocent volunteered for this mission. So in May of 1823, he and his wife, his infant son, mind you, along with his brother, set forth on this journey, which, coming from the middle of Siberia, took more than a year in the early 19th century to traverse. Once he arrived, though, he would stay in the Alaskan islands for nearly 50 years, and he became known as the Apostle of North America. One of the first things he did was he helped to participate in their life as fishermen, but also offered them skills that became helpful in their daily living, teaching them to be carpenters, blacksmiths, and bricklayers. And from that, the people of the islands began to build a church with the new skills that they learned, so that Innocent could bring the gospel to the people. He began to expand to the Fox Islands and other islands that were in the Aleutes, some of whom had already been converted to Christianity, but because of his love and magnetism began to follow along with him and began to regard him as their spiritual father as he began to arrive in the area. He learned the languages, and keep in mind this was no small feat because most of each of the tribes in the Aleutian Islands had their own distinctive dialects. So he learned nearly every one that he came into contact with, one of those being the Aleut language of the Fox Islands. He even helped develop a Cyrillic alphabet for it, i.e. Cyrillic, which was the origin of the Russian language, and helped to use that as part of the liturgy, also as a translation for the Gospel of Matthew in many ways because they could have a written version of the gospel to be able to study and to read on their own, as also he taught many of them to read, since some of their languages did not emphasize reading but rather oral storytelling. He continued to travel around, going to the mainland of Alaska in 1829, traveling to Sitka Island, where he began his mission with another distinctive group of Alaskan people, the Tlingit people, who were fairly difficult audience to reach because they were a little wary of this man coming in, teaching them about new ways of doing things. And yet, despite the fact that they remained very protective of their own customs, they realized that Innocent was not there to change their customs, but was there to offer them a message that brought, in many ways, a lot of their native stories and their traditions together into an understanding of how much the Creator God loved them, and as such, many of them adopted Christianity. Innocent, as I said earlier, was the name given to him by many of these people, and because of his lasting legacy, his ability to preach the gospel, but also his ability to relate and love the people that he came to serve on their terms, it set the bar very high and set the bar as being very open as well for continued missionary work from Orthodox priests to come and offer to the people of Alaska, both the islanders and the mainland tribes, who in many ways were very receptive to the gospel. Keep in mind, the history, of course, was that all of the missionaries who came in later days were quite as respectful to their customs as Innocent was, but yet it is a reminder that those who bring the gospel are willing to live, to know, and to build relationships with the people, establish an opening for the gospel to continue to be proclaimed, not simply by words, but in actions and love. A good reminder for us that while sometimes as Episcopalians we may turn our back on missionary work because of the not-so-good legacy of how it's been done by some, we are constantly called to share the gospel by offering our very lives and respecting the lives of those to whom we offer the wonderful story of salvation and hope that has changed the world forever. Thanks for joining me. Enjoyed this session is always with you tomorrow. Elizabeth Pack will be with you as John Donne, the great poet, is our saint of the day. Look forward to seeing you back on April the 1st when I will be covering F.D. Maurice as our saint of the day. Take care. See you then.